You know, I find it pretty funny that, in spite of the fact that the medium of visual novels are almost unanimously these character-driven stories, visual novels by design are stories that are built around the idea of characters over plot. That's just was the natural evolution from Galgay into, you know, the various branching paths of visual novels. But I find it hilarious that in spite of the fact that visual novels are this medium that is built around character, it is so exceedingly rare for there to be a strong ensemble cast in a visual novel. Now, this is probably due to the fact that a lot of visual novels are built around that Galgay formula. They are, by and large, stories in which you have one central protagonist, and the story focuses on his relationship, his individual relationship, with various heroines, and that is where you form your character drama. But there are a few stories that take that a step further, and are able to create a living, breathing ensemble cast, and that's what I really think is when you're able to take your story to the next level. I talked about the Fruit of Grisaia, and I think the Fruit of Grisaia does a pretty good job of doing this, especially by the end, and once you have read the various spin-offs, the girls of Mihama and Yuji are able to feel pretty close-knit. I don't think they're some of the strongest ensemble cast. I think a lot of Grisaia's depth comes from the individual relationships of the girls with Yuji. But, ultimately, it does benefit from the fact that an ensemble does form to a degree. You know, you have games like the Little Busters, in which Little Busters is this story that is about friendship, and the medium by which it does this is making this real, living, breathing group of friends. Same thing with Higurashi. These are stories that have such a well-defined cast of characters who all have relationships with each other and not solely with the main character. You know, Riki is not the only person who has interactions in Little Busters, nor is Keiichi the only person who has interactions in Higurashi. It's this web of character interactions with different people caring about different things and treating people in different ways. And that not only makes every character feel more alive, it creates this sort of unanimous feel where the cast has a personality, and you can love the cast as a cast. Every single member of the ensemble is contributing something, and ultimately what you're left with is something much greater than any of the parts. Now, of the stories that have a strong ensemble cast, and there aren't many, it really is kind of limited to Little Busters, Higurashi. There's a few others. Grisaia does an okay job. Parts of Air do an okay job. But I think easily the story with the strongest ensemble cast in all of visual novels is Muv-Luv Alternative. Now, Muv-Luv Alternative is renowned. It is the highest rated visual novel in the visual novel database by a country mile. It is something that is renowned as a classic, an undisputed best story ever, and I don't know that I'd go that far. Muv-Luv Alternative is a solid story. It is a story that, with some minor tweaking, would be that seminal classic that people like to tout it as. But even while I believe Muv-Luv Alternative has some stumblings, its characterization and the cast, the ensemble, is unparalleled. Absolutely unparalleled. Even the likes of the Little Busters and even the likes of the kids in Hinamizawa do not come close to the sense of togetherness and the sense of friendship and just the bonds between people that are felt between the members of Squad 207, later Squad A, in Muv-Luv Alternative. What it really boils down to is that Muv-Luv Alternative has excellent theming, and that every member of the cast is built around this theming. Every member of the story is connected in this way. Muv-Luv Alternative is a story about how life is inherently precious and beautiful. The fact that we have this normal every day, the fact that each of us can live a normal life, the fact that we can go to school, that we can hang out, and that we don't have to worry about living is a blessing beyond, what any of us can understand. Muv-Luv Alternative is a story that takes place primarily in this not post-apocalyptic, but this apocalyptic war setting, in which all of these characters are fighting for their lives, and the stakes are so high, but in spite of that, in spite of overwhelming tragedy, it really is the best war story I've ever experienced. It really brings to light how atrocious war is, and how much suffering is spread across the board. But in spite of that, all the characters are so strong. Muv-Luv is a story all about persistence. It is a story about how all of these people are able to face adversity, face overwhelming adversity, but continue past it. Muv-Luv has a cast filled with some of the strongest characters I've ever seen in fiction. Ultimately, and this is something that I really, really give Muv-Luv credit for, is Muv-Luv has this interesting way of structuring character dynamics, in that Takeru, the main character, is sort of an outsider to this world. He is not from the world, and he does not have the mental capacity or the history and the familiarity with tragedy that everyone else does. And so, kind of flipping the script on the usual power dynamic of visual novels, and of a lot of things, in fact, pretty much everyone is stronger than Takeru. Now, Takeru is literally the savior of humanity. He is a strong character in a very literal sense. But in terms of emotional complexity, and this is where Muv-Luv really does a great job putting you into the world, so many bad things happen in Muv-Luv all of the time. And it always ends up being someone else that Takeru has to go to. Takeru was never able to shoulder the burden on his own. And that's not his weakness. That's the truth of the world. This is a world in which the tragedy is so deep and the hurting is so bad that the only way we as a people can cope with it is coming together. That's another part of the story and part of what Muv-Luv is about. And it's only through that the themes really come into play. I absolutely love how after, any big major story beat, Takeru has the option of going to whatever member of Squad 207 that he prefers, that he likes the most, and spending time with them, and really confiding in them. It makes you feel how important it is to have other people, because you're not hanging out with them to hang out, you're hanging out with them because you need to bear the burden. And ultimately, the fact that all these characters share their pain, the fact that everyone is mounting so much suffering, but is walking forward in spite of all the suffering, just makes Muv-Luv and the Squad 207 feel so tight-knit. You really care about all of these characters, save one, but that's the subject of a different video. And Muv-Luv is so quickly able to characterize likable characters in this world where it is conditioning the reader to expect and value togetherness and connection and perseverance and resilience. All these qualities are put on such a pedestal, and you really are in that mindset. It's able to take characters like Marimo, Captain Marimo, and Captain Isumi, and develop them so quickly. Marimo is able to be this character who spends an entire game and 40-50% of another game not being all that important, but just a little time and some really, really masterful, I'm talking incredibly deft characterization, incredibly concise writing. She is able to become a fully living, breathing character because you realize that this character who has been by your side, who has been helping you and pushing you to grow stronger, who has been supportive of you, but strict with you, in spite of everything, is a character who has braved the worst of this world, but is still pushing forward, and is still pushing you forward, and is still working, and still believing. The faith has not been lost. And so it is so easy to respect Marimo, and I think that the fact that this is a war story and that it takes place in military really helps that. This idea of respect for your fellow soldiers and respect for the people who have seen and understand war, you really feel it. When Squad 207 has its first real combat soiree with the beta, and Takeru fails, suddenly you understand. You understand how horrible war truly is, how scared and how terrifying it can be. And you look at characters like Marimo, and that just makes them shine so much brighter. You look at these people who are able to face atrocities unflinching, who are able to look into the darkness of people and the world and their life and continue forward, and you so instantly can understand and respect them. It's this wonderful sort of trick almost. And it makes it so that every time Muv-Luv introduces a member, every time the cast gets bigger, you feel that. You feel that respect. You feel that real, earnest appreciation for every single member and what they bring to the table. You know, you look at just characters like Tama, or you look at characters like Mikoto, who are these much more light characters as opposed to Maya or Ayamine and Chizuru, who are a bit more serious. You know, you look at Tama and Mikoto, and the fact that they're able to make jokes and smile and laugh and be these happy-go-lucky people when, you know, not an hour ago you were vomiting and crying your eyes out because you had to sit there and watch your fellow soldiers die because you were too scared to pull the trigger. It puts you so vividly into the shoes of the protagonist. Takeru is not someone who has as much character as someone like Kazumi Yuji from the Fruit of Grisaya, I don't think. But he is a character who is so vivid in the mindset. It is so easy to get into Takeru's mindset and to feel all of the horrors and appreciate all of the good things through his eyes. And it's all because Muv-Luv has this cast. Every single character is you respect in this way. All of your friends who are continuing to push you forward, you understand how strong everyone is, and how valuable that strength is, and how important it is to be together. Every time something happens, and where do you go but, you know, whatever squad mate you trust the most, you feel that. When Marimo dies, I described my sentiments towards Marimo dying as mourning the loss of a person. When Marimo died, it really felt like someone I know in my life died. It was such an immediate thing, and it was so shocking that it affected me in a way that the death of a character has never before shook me. And to this day, nothing has had the same effect on me psychologically as grieving the loss of Marimo. Chapter 7 of Muv-Luv Alternative is this masterpiece. Chapter 7 is this whole, just expertly, start to finish crafted masterpiece, where Takeru is broken down, and you understand that, and you feel how weak you are. But at the same time, you feel how much everyone loves you. You feel how much you have to care about each other. You feel about how close these people are. And when Marimo is torn away from you, and Takeru runs away, you feel that. You feel how pathetic you are, but how much, in spite of that, in spite of knowing how weak you're being, you just want that comfort. It is so amazing that Muv-Luv is able to make me resonate with weakness, with a character's weakness, with the parts of them that you should admonish. You know, normally protagonists, a lot of the protagonists that you look up to are people who are these pillars of strength. You know, I look up to someone like Guts, maybe, because Guts is so brave and unflinching in the face of all of the tragedy of the world around him. And Takeru gets to that point, but he stumbles a lot, because it's hard to be that. But every time he stumbles, I'm right there with him. Because the characters are so well defined, and because I am able to get so close to them, the fact that whenever any of them die, and everyone dies, But whenever you have to go through that loss, it feels real. You feel like you're losing, this light that was pushing you forward. And with each loss that you feel, the burden falls on you to now be stronger. And all of these sentiments are so perfectly resonant in the player. I wanted to run away. I wanted to see Marimo again. And because I was so perfectly in that headspace, when the way Chapter 7 manipulates you, when Marimo comes back and you have to lose her again, and when you go to confide with this loss in the person who you most like, the character who you're closest to, and then they forget you, that sequence of blows was devastating. Chapter 7 was so hard to read, very legitimately. Not because of the viscera or the detail of what was actually going on, but because of how the events, because of how manipulating and toying with and, destroying these bonds that these characters have with one another hurt so much and was so real. Chapter 7 was absolutely unbelievable. And from Chapter 7 of Muv-Luv Alternative to the end, it is just cashing in on the amazing character work it has done throughout the game. Chapter 7 starts this long, bitter cycle of every step forward is paid for by the loss of an ally. And every time one of your fellow soldiers is killed in action, it is horrifying. You feel the blunt trauma of loss, and it feels like life has been taken away. In this story in which life is so precious, and in this story in which every character has a relationship to everyone else, in this story in which I can tell you how Ayamine will react to being in a room with Chizuru, or how Ayamine and Maya will act, or how Maya and Mikoto will act. In this story in which every character cares about one another, because every character has been through so much together, and every character has learned that the only way they can continue to go through so much is if they do it together. You feel the damage that is done by their loss. But it's a loss that builds to something. Because ultimately, Muv-Luv is still about how beautiful the world is. And even though, your life gets so much harder and so much bleaker, and it's so much harder to keep moving forward as Takaru, as more and more of your allies die, as people who you relied on die, and the burden of being the better man falls more and more and more on you, and you have that responsibility. You accept it knowing the consequences. You accept it knowing that you do have to be strong now. And you will become stronger, because the idea of a world where people don't need to die on the streets, the idea of a world in which you can go to sleep at night and be happy, where you can just hang out with your friends and not worry about what might happen tomorrow. The fact that you have the option of living a normal life, that's really what Muv-Luv comes down to, is that it is about the value of choice. Because in a world in which you are at war, in a world in which living and life itself is valuable, you do not have choice. Takaru has to join the military. All these characters have to fight. You have to be strong. They have to be able to persevere, or they will die. The ability to be in the extra world, or be in the Altered Fable world. The ability to just hang out with your friends and be happy. The ability to say, I want to hang out with Ayamine. Ayamine is my favorite character. The ability to say, I want to hang out with Ayamine. We're just going to go to the roof, eat yakisoba. That is a profound blessing. It is such a blessing to be alive. And Muv-Luv would not be able to say this message so powerfully and so resolutely if not for the fact that it had the best cast in any story I've ever read. I think a lot about the last chapter of Muv-Luv. I think a lot about the original members of Squad 207 being the only survivors. And I think a lot about how, in their final moments, every character, in a moment of self-sacrifice, was willing to give up anything to secure the future. I think about how Takeru is left alone with even the person he cared about most, Sumika, even if I hated her. How, even with the person he cared about most torn away from him, and every friend he ever had dead and eaten alive, for the opportunity to live a better life. You know, I think about how the price of freedom is steep. And I do legitimately understand. And I do feel grateful for my life. It is such a... I think it really is a testament to Muv-Luv's quality that the theme of Muv-Luv and the specific details that it is trying to convey are things that are so far removed from our life. You know, living as we do, happy and free as we do, it is really hard for us as a people to take that step back and go, you know, yeah, the fact that I have a washing machine, you know, that's pretty good. You know, there's a large portion of the world that doesn't have washing machines, is something that's hard to actually appreciate. But when Takeru goes to the tree outside of the military academy at the end of the game, when he thinks about how every single member of his squad has been killed, when he salutes their grave, and, you know, he just thinks about the weight of the loss, but doesn't crack under it, and doesn't run away. And it really does feel powerful. There are many deaths in Muv-Luv, and with every death, Takeru becomes just a little bit stronger. Until by the end, you aren't looking at death the same way. You aren't thinking about the loss of something that supported you. You're thinking about the great honor that these people have paid. You're thinking about how brave they were, and you're thinking about how amazing it is that you are alive. And Muv-Luv has a bit of a controversial ending, kind of, in that it is an ending where you go to an alternate timeline in the end, and it is the most perfect timeline. It is a timeline in which not only, you know, is everyone alive, there is no war, but characters who you wouldn't expect are back. It is the most happy ending ever. And to some people, that feels a little cheap after, you know, going through this many-hour-long story where you understand how steep the price of freedom is and everyone you love dies. But I'm okay with it. I'm okay with it because Muv-Luv is all about understanding. It's not about... the important thing isn't that the loss happened. The important thing is that you have gleaned how valuable life is. And when Takeru goes back to the extraverse at the end, and he has this happy ending, I think the thing that really sells the ending for me is that every time he sees one of his friends, just sees them, there is no emotional interaction, there's no anything, but he sees them. And even though his memory is gone, and he can't really explain why, he starts to cry. Because he understands just how special this is. He understands that the life that he has is an unrivaled blessing. And that really is what makes the ending for me. And like we were saying about choice, the whole game, you have had kind of the illusion of choice. Muv-Luv has choices in it that kind of allow you to steer Takeru towards one girl or the other, but ultimately you're left with Sumika. And as much as I don't like that, it does somewhat tie into this idea that, you know, that choice is fantastic, that in a better world we have the gift of choice. And what does Takeru win back when he goes back to the extra world? But the ability to choose. But the ability to be happy with whoever he wants. Muv-Luv Alternative has problems. It has some pacing problems. It has the worst character in any story ever. But amongst all that, it has a cast of characters, a living, breathing cast of characters that I respect more than anything. The cast of Muv-Luv, every single one of them, are heroes. Legitimate heroes. And I have never felt so much regard, so much esteem for a group of people in media, in fiction, in visual novels, in anything like that anywhere else. Muv-Luv Alternative is worth reading. It might not be the best visual novel ever written, but it does have the best cast in any story ever. Thank you.